When a Republican tried to corner Jasmine Crockett on live TV, nobody expected what came next. What started as a routine debate about education turned into one of the most viral political moments of the year, a calm, devastating takedown that left everyone speechless. The room went silent, the internet lit up, and millions of viewers watched a masterclass in composure, clarity, and courage. But this wasn't just a heated exchange, it was a reality check. A moment when one congresswoman refused to let political theater rewrite the truth. She didn't shout. She didn't dodge.
For offering it. Students in the DC voucher program should be protected from unaccredited schools. We have seen three consistent things about the voucher program since Republicans created it 20 years ago. The program has failed to improve academic achievement as measured by reading and math scores. Republicans continue to weaken the evaluation requirements for the program, and Republicans continue to allow unaccredited schools to participate in the program. The bill would allow schools first participating in the program after enactment of the bill 5 years. Let me repeat that. 5 years to become accredited. That is ridiculously weak when it comes to standards. Accreditation helps ensure that schools provide a high-quality education. The federal government requires colleges and universities to be accredited to receive federal funds. It is even more important that schools participating in federally funded DC voucher programs, which educate students during key developmental years, also be accredited. I asked unanimous consent to enter into the record a Washington Post investigation of the program titled "Quality Controls Lacking for DC Schools Accepting Federal Vouchers."
Without objection to order.
Now let me go on and deal with this because y'all want to talk about my education because MAGA loves to talk about my education. Let me tell you something. I got it. I got degrees, okay? I can count them off for you if you want me to, and I am proud of that. But let me tell you, it was no thanks to any Republicans that I got my education. My mom, regardless of what tropes y'all might like to put out there about black folk or government workers, let me be clear, my mom has been a federal government worker my entire life. She has worked hard for this federal government, regardless of all the nonsense and the terrible things you say about federal government employees, and somehow she managed to raise me. But she still wasn't getting paid her due like most of us that work for the federal government. So what did my mom do? My mom worked multiple jobs. I know that there are tropes out there that act like black folk are the ones that are always looking out for a handout. But my mom worked multiple jobs to make sure that she could pay to send me to private school. So yes, I went to private school. I went to private school from 7th grade all the way through high school, and then I earned a scholarship to attend college at a private school, the same one that Amy Coney Barrett attended. Yes, we both attended Rhodes College, and then I earned another scholarship so that I could go to law school. Let me tell you something, my academic success, it started in public school. Public school was my foundation. So pre-K through 6, yes, I believe in pre-K, I was in public school. Unfortunately, it was too dangerous for me to go and matriculate through the junior high as well as the high school. In addition to the fact that when it came to the standardized tests, I typically was at the top of the standardized tests in the state, and so my mom wanted to challenge me to the best of her ability. So that is what she did. She did not look to the federal government and say, I've decided I want to send my child to a private school, so therefore the federal government needs to give me this money, instead of making it an inequitable situation for other students that are literally not in the same situation. Yes, I got accepted to private school because my parents worked with me even when I got out of public school, because they had that luxury of being able to do that, and because both of my parents happened to be college educated and they could help me to do my work. But nevertheless, regardless of my education, because I've done both, I can actually be an advocate, and I understand the difference. And I do believe in the importance of having a sound public education. And maybe my mom would not have had to work so many jobs if there had not been people siphoning money out of our public schools to the extent that she felt like they were not going to be able to challenge me, her gifted child, as I was continuing to grow. So all we're saying is, if you're gonna give out $20-something thousand to $21,000 as it relates to these 1,400 students per child, then give out the same $21,000 for the students that are in public school. That's it. We're looking for equity. Something that y'all don't like. I know it's a bad word, but we're looking for equity. And I know that the gentle lady from North Carolina wants to brag about how many black and brown children. I will remind her one of the reasons the president has a problem with the city of DC right now is because it's black and brown. That's what it is. I mean, it would be odd if like the vast majority of the people that are taking advantage are not black and brown. That's the city. Okay, I yield.
All right. Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none.
She simply exposed hypocrisy so plainly that even her critics couldn't deny what they were hearing. And within just a few seconds, Jasmine Crockett managed to do what so many politicians fail to do. She made people stop scrolling, stop arguing, and actually listen. Here's how it all unfolded. The hearing was supposed to be about school funding, specifically a program that allows students to use government money to attend private schools. Republicans framed it as school choice, a way to give poor children, especially those in struggling communities, the chance to escape failing public schools. On paper it sounded noble. Who wouldn't want better education for every child? But when you looked closer, the story started to unravel. Democrats, including Crockett, argued that these so-called voucher programs were quietly draining money from public schools, the very schools that most working-class families rely on. Instead of improving education, they were helping private institutions profit while leaving millions of kids behind. And that's where the tension began to build. One Republican congresswoman challenged Crockett directly, asking what Democrats had ever done for poor black children in America. She wanted examples, numbers, receipts, but that challenge would backfire spectacularly. Because what came next wasn't just a response, it was an education in truth. Crockett started by thanking her colleague Congressman Frost for sponsoring the amendment they were debating. Then, without raising her voice, she calmly laid out the facts. She explained that Democrats had already investigated how voucher programs were being abused. They had asked for data from the Department of Education years earlier. Data Republicans were now pretending didn't exist. And then she turned the focus to the department itself, exposing something most viewers didn't realize. The same Republicans now claiming to defend poor children were the ones who had spent years trying to shut down the very department responsible for protecting them. She reminded everyone that a former Republican appointee literally said her goal was to dismantle the Department of Education from within. That's not an opinion, that's a quote on record. So Crockett asked the obvious question, how can you claim to care about children's education when your plan is to destroy the one agency designed to keep schools accountable? The silence after that question said everything. But Crockett wasn't finished. She broke down what the Department of Education actually does, in language anyone could understand. She explained that its job isn't to micromanage classrooms or dictate lesson plans. It exists to ensure equal access to education, provide funding for disadvantaged students, and conduct civil rights investigations when schools fail their most vulnerable kids. In short, it's the department that steps in when the system breaks. She reminded the room that this federal role has been essential in protecting students with disabilities, enforcing anti-discrimination laws, and ensuring that poverty doesn't permanently determine a child's future. Then she paused, looked around, and delivered the line that would echo across social media. Well, she said. Let me ask you, what else have y'all done for poor black people in this country? The words hung in the air like a spotlight. There was no anger, no shouting, just quiet precision. A simple question that cut through decades of political spin, because the truth was, they hadn't done much. And she didn't leave it at that. She doubled down, calmly stating, give me another bill that y'all got, because that is not what you are known for, looking out for poor black people. It was one of those moments that every viewer could feel in their chest, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. You could see the shift in the room. The Republican side went silent. Even the moderator didn't quite know how to move on, but Crockett did. She turned that uncomfortable silence into a teachable moment, explaining why this debate was so much bigger than one funding bill. At its core, she said, this was about who actually benefits from these programs. Private schools can pick and choose who they accept. They can, and often do, deny entry to certain students. That means these vouchers, funded by taxpayer money, can end up reinforcing segregation and inequality rather than solving it. And she pointed out the real-world danger of the current administration's approach. They could, she warned, tell private schools they're not allowed to give scholarships to students of color, just like similar actions had been taken before on the federal level. Her point was crystal clear: when government power is used selectively, it always ends up hurting the same communities it claims to help. Then she brought it home. She connected education to a larger pattern of neglect, from the over-policing of black communities to the underfunding of schools that serve them. "Please don't get it twisted," she said. "We, the American people, know that y'all have not been fighting for what's best for black folk." It was calm, controlled, devastating. And as she yielded her time, the tension in that room was so thick you could feel it through the screen, but the impact didn't stop there. What Jasmine Crockett did in that moment was much bigger than a viral quote. She reframed an entire debate about what school choice really means, exposing how easily good intentions can be weaponized to push harmful agendas. To understand why her response resonated so deeply, you have to look at the history behind it. For decades, school choice has been sold as freedom, letting parents escape so-called failing public schools. But in practice, it often diverts funds away from those schools, starving them of resources, while private schools benefit. Those private schools can set their own rules, pick their own students, and create their own standards. It's not freedom, it's exclusion dressed up as opportunity, and when you trace the money, you start to see the pattern. The corporations and lobbyists who back these voucher programs aren't doing it out of charity. They're doing it because it opens a massive market. Education is a business, not a public service. Crockett's argument exposed that logic for what it is. She reminded everyone that education isn't a privilege you earn by having the right connections, it's a right every child deserves. She also highlighted something that often gets lost in these debates: the federal government's role isn't to replace local schools, it's to make sure no child is left behind because of where they live or how much money their parents make. Without that oversight, the system tilts toward privilege, not fairness. Think about it: without the Department of Education, there'd be no national accountability for discrimination, no federal aid for special needs programs, no enforcement of Title IX protections. The playing field would tilt entirely toward those who already have power, and that's exactly why the department has been targeted for decades. When politicians say they want to abolish it, they're not talking about cutting red tape. They're talking about removing the safety net that protects the most vulnerable kids in America. So when Jasmine Crockett asked that piercing question, "What have you done for poor black people?" she wasn't being confrontational for the sake of it. She was pulling back the curtain on a much larger truth, that too often political concern for marginalized communities only appears when it's convenient. And the brilliance of her delivery is what made the clip explode online. She never raised her tone, never broke composure. She used facts, history, and humanity, a combination that's almost impossible to argue against. That's why millions of viewers connected with it. Because everyone could sense she was speaking from experience, not talking points. She understood that education isn't just about books and tests, it's about equality, dignity, and opportunity. Now, beyond the emotion of the moment, let's unpack why this hit such a nerve nationally. When you strip away the rhetoric, this debate exposes two competing visions for America's future. One side sees education as a public investment, a shared foundation that lifts everyone. The other sees it as a commodity, something that can be bought, sold, or privatized. And Crockett's words captured what's at stake if we choose the latter. Because when public education weakens, inequality hardens, the wealth gap grows, racial disparities deepen, and the cycle continues. She even tied it to the global picture, pointing out how countries like China and India are racing ahead by pouring resources into education, while America debates whether to fund its own schools. Her warning was simple but powerful: you can't win a race by starving your runners. And that's exactly what defunding education does: it cripples the next generation before they even reach the starting line. By the end of the hearing, the contrast couldn't have been clearer. On one side, sound bites and slogans; on the other, data, logic, and moral clarity. And that's what made Jasmine Crockett's approach stand out. She didn't just challenge the narrative, she dismantled it piece by piece. She reminded the room that the Department of Education isn't some faceless bureaucracy, it's the reason millions of children have a chance at a future. She shifted the conversation from politics to principles, from party loyalty to public responsibility, and when she said that the department's job is to level the field, she wasn't speaking theoretically. She was talking about the lived reality of millions of kids who would otherwise be left behind, kids in poor neighborhoods, in underfunded districts, in families that can't afford private tuition. That's the heart of her message. Equity isn't charity, it's justice, and it's why her words are still echoing long after the cameras stopped rolling. Because when you strip away the labels, Republican, Democrat, left, right, what she defended was something universal, the right of every child to learn, to dream, to have a chance. The clip went viral not because it was flashy but because it was rare. It showed a politician refusing to play the game, refusing to let cynicism drown out truth. She didn't use empty outrage, she used precision, she used heart, and that's what made it powerful. In an era where political debates often devolve into shouting matches, Jasmine Crockett reminded everyone what real leadership looks like, not noise, not grandstanding, but clarity backed by conviction. That's why this moment wasn't just a win in a hearing room, it was a cultural reset. It made viewers rethink what representation can sound like when it's rooted in truth instead of talking points. And whether you agree with her politics or not, one thing is undeniable, she forced a national conversation about who education should serve, and why it matters. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about left or right, it's about whether we believe that every kid, no matter their race, zip code, or income, deserves a fair shot at success. That's what Crockett was defending. That's what this exchange revealed. So the next time you hear someone talk about school choice, remember what Jasmine Crockett said that day. Remember that calm, cutting line, "What else have y'all done for poor black people?" and what it represented. It wasn't just a question, it was a challenge to do better, to be honest about whose interests are really being served. And maybe that's why the clip keeps circulating online, because deep down, people are hungry for truth that doesn't need a filter, for leadership that feels real again. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win an argument, she exposed a playbook, and gave millions of viewers the context to finally see it for what it is. If you believe education should lift everyone, not just the privileged few, then don't let this message fade. Hit that like button, share this video so more people see what really happened in that hearing, and make sure you're subscribed. Because the next time truth gets buried under politics, we'll be here to dig it back out, one story at a time.